Now, you may be aware that when we went to the last federal election, the Coalition said that if they were re-elected, they will move the 20,000 plus welfare recipients in the Northern Territory, those who are currently on the income management and the basics card will be moved to the cashless debit card. Now, of course, the Coalition won the election and they are looking to pass legislation which would change those people on the basics card to recipients of the cashless debit card. Now, the new card would allow, we understand, a quarantining of up to 100% of people's welfare. At the moment, it tends to be 50-50. It stops people from buying grog or pornography at the moment. And the new card, we're told, will allow people to be able to buy it more places. It'll be much more flexible in the areas which you can use it. There have been some suggestions by the government that there are positive results from the trial sites that's been trialled down at Ceduna, in the East Kimberley and also in parts of Queensland. We also heard when the first review done of the card must have been 2017, that the Australian National Audit Office found absolutely no evidence or no proof that it was having any positive benefits because they couldn't be measured. They've done another study. I'm not sure what the results of that. Well, let's find out more because the Senate's Community Affairs Legislation Committee is sitting in Alice Springs today. They're doing hearings into the cashless debit card. One person on that committee is Labor's NT Senator Malarndirri McCarthy. She'll be here this afternoon for the hearing. And a good morning to you, Malarndirri McCarthy. Oh, I think I might have lost Malarndirri McCarthy. We'll see if we can find her. Yes, good morning, Malarndirri McCarthy.
Good morning, Stewart. Good morning to you and your listeners.
Just looking at the committee now, it's a Senate committee, obviously, looking into the cashless debit card. Who will you be speaking to here in Alice Springs?
Sure. We've got the Central Land Council and also the Tangentyere Council appearing, along with the NPY Women's Council, First Nations Foundation, the Jesuit Social Services and the Northern Territory Government.
Now, as we take evidence, I know you've already taken evidence in Adelaide. What are you hearing?
Look, we're hearing consistently the concerns around what this means. I think there's two fundamental ones, in particular for the Northern Territory. We have had a hearing in Darwin, and that is the rolling over of 21 to 23,000 people who are on the basics card to the CDC. And the issue of quarantining, Stuart, that the minister has the power to quarantine up to 100%. Of a person's income, and I find that really concerning. And the evidence that's coming through from human rights groups also finds that very concerning.
Do we have any evidence? This is an interesting one. We've been discussing this all the way through this process. The government started off being unable to tell us, this is before they went to the election. Actually, I couldn't get a straight answer out of the Social Services Minister what percentage they would quarantine under the new card if it indeed was rolled out in the Northern Territory. Have we got any greater clarity on what will happen to people who are currently on the basics card if they go ahead with this as planned?
We understand that the people who are currently on the basics card, the government is looking at the 50% quarantining, which is currently the rate for basics card. But that's only at the moment. What they're not confirming is the fact that they can raise that rate at any time under the minister's discretion, which is what will be in this bill.
Would that be down to Centrelink to make those decisions? Who actually would make that decision about the percentage of quarantining?
Yeah, good question. It's something I've actually been asking consistently of the minister just in last week's Senate estimates as well, that the response from the department and the minister is that it would be a community decision. And I said, well, how do you define community? Is it a mayor of a council? Is it an organisation? Who actually determines if a person's income should go from 50% to 100% quarantined? So there is a real grey area around that. And human rights groups have raised that concern as well. But there was another curious thing as well, Stuart, which you and your listeners would appreciate. With the basics card, we know that people couldn't and can't purchase, alcohol and pornography. But with the cashless debit card, they can purchase pornography.
Okay, so that's one change there.
Yes, and I did ask the department. I said, well, what was the policy decision in that change? And they couldn't answer the question, and neither could the minister.
Is that because maybe they don't have the capacity with this card? Because it's really just like a bank card, isn't it?
Well, I don't think they've actually given it any thought because I've said to them that for the people of the Northern Territory, we've had consistent quarantining for such a long time as a result of the intervention, and now you're asking people to move on to another card, and yet you haven't given any real evidence as to whether the current basics card has worked.
Just wondering, because one of the things which was rolled out in the last month or so was the suggestion that there were good, I think it was in the Hervey Bay, Wide Bay area of Queensland, suggesting there had been some favourable outcomes in terms of youth unemployment. Has that been presented to the committee?
Not as actual evidence. We did have one participant from Bundaberg, and who's not actually on the card, but is involved with it in terms of the advisory group. She gave evidence of anecdotal evidence, but there is no actual statistical or data evidence to say that it's working at this stage.
We're still waiting, I understand, for the Department of Social Services to conduct a second analysis and review of the cashless debit card. Have they presented that? Has that actually been released as yet? Because the first one, of course, as we know, was found by the Australian National Audit Office as having there was actually no evidence because they couldn't prove any evidence of benefit. Has this second review come out yet?
It's still lacking in that kind of evidence as well, Stewart, and that's what's clearly coming through in all of the witnesses, in particular the academics who face the committee. They are repeating the fact that there is no evidence showing that this actually works. Now,
Labor supported the trials, but is now saying you would prefer it to be an opt-in system. Now, does that remain the policy of Labor, that even though you did support the earlier trials, you're now not supporting the rollout any further and you do want it to be an opt-in?
Absolutely. We are very concerned that because of the lack of evidence that should have been there as a result of those trials, we have real concerns about it now being imposed across the board onto people. And the real concern, of course, here in the Northern Territory is the fact that there are people on the basics card already.
Now, in an opt-in system, would that require, for instance, you'd have to be able to prove that you can manage your money? How would that work? It sounds like it could be very complex.
I think it's more about choice, Stuart, so that people feel that if they need assistance, and this will assist them, it's really down to their ability to choose, whereas at the moment, they have no choice.
Sitting in Alice Springs. Now, Jackie Lambie, we understand, is an important vote in this debate. Has she come to any of these sittings?
Certainly not any of the inquiries I've been on, but I have to say I have personally invited Senator Lambie to the Northern Territory, and I'm hoping that she will be able to do that in the new year.
Has she made it clear what her thoughts are? Because it was being reported that she was for it, but when we spoke to her office earlier, she said she hadn't made a decision. What's your understanding of her point of view on this?
My understanding is the same, that final decision hasn't been made by Senator Lambie simply because she is getting the different evidence where she's going. So I am keen to get her to the Northern Territory.
Yesterday we heard from the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Ken Wyatt, who was appointing Marcia Langton and Tom Calma to head up a working group to look at creating a voice to government. Sounds like Labor will support the process but is not happy with the process. Would that be fair to say?
That is fair to say. We obviously have maintained our position as enshrining the voice to Parliament, but naturally we want to continue the conversation and make sure that it doesn't fall off the rail.
Does this point to the weakness of Ken Wyatt's position in government to be able to influence his own party to, say, follow what was outlined in the Uluru Statement?
Look, it certainly reflects the complexity that Minister Wyatt has to face within his own side, and we're very aware of that. And I think that the fact that he's now got Professor Langton and Tom Calma on board, they're also aware of that as well. And what we want to do is make sure that this continues in terms of trying to influence and encourage people to see the benefit of hopefully achieving a constitutionally enshrined voice.
And even in replying and responding to her appointment, Marcia Langton made it clear that she supported the original proposal. Do you think they'll be pushing it uphill, given their own personal feelings, but also the fact they're working in a framework set by this government?
It was always going to be tough, Stuart. I think what we have to look at here is that we need to keep this alive. We need to keep the hopes and dreams and beliefs of people who came together at Uluru very much front and centre. It may not be the direction at the moment that people want, but certainly Labor will be encouraging all politicians who are involved with this process to see that the importance of having a voice enshrined in the Parliament.
You still think it's worthwhile to go through the process and to be part of the process?
Look, we're not wreckers. We're not going to wreck this. We see it's got to be bigger and better than that. We've got to be above that. We're not happy that they haven't accepted the enshrinement, but we do acknowledge and respect the fact that consultations are going to occur with two esteemed leaders in Professor Langton and Tom Calma, and we will do our best to keep encouraging people to look at enshrinement.